Now, let's quickly go into the cloud hardening, right, especially from the HIPAA perspective, right? So we looked at those 10 guardrails, right? To me, the most important ones, especially if you're running a HIPAA workload, these are the 5 which are the most important ones, right? So I'll quickly go over that, right? I wouldn't go very deep, right? So first one is identity and access management, right? So what we mean by identity and access management. Now, if you are running your stuff on AWS, right, you will have, if you look at that picture, right, you will have top picture. You will have operations people, you will have developers, you will have end users who are accessing your application, you will have APIs because cloud, lot of development is DevOps, right? You have APIs and build happening and automation happening, right? So you have all those kind of accounts, right? So once you have all those kind of accounts, you need to be ensuring how you secure them, right? Because they're sitting outside there. So AWS has things like MFA, multi-factor authentication. You can enable it, right? So that's pretty easy to enable it, and that's a no-brainer. So that's actually recommended or required for all ops people to be enabled, right, for the HIPAA kind of workloads. You should also enable for some of the development purposes, right? Now, we talked about coming to a bastion host, that could be another control, right, which you restrict all the ops and developers to be coming to that bastion host to log in. In AWS, there is a concept of a root account, similar to a Unix root account. This is your AWS account level root account. And similar to Unix, right, no one should be using root. Root is just used to set up your account first time and set up billing and other things, and set up your basic accounts, and then you just should be locking that account, right? That's kind of if you see anyone trying to use an AWS level root account, that's probably not acceptable. Now, IAM policies are much granular, right? So I wouldn't go into that. I know there's 400 or different kind of groups or privileges available. So you must be using it to your advantage. Use the least privilege mechanism, just giving the privileged set up a groups of users and give those least privileges to the group, right, and assign it to individuals that group. And then you will be in AWS, you'll be playing up with a lot of these service accounts or API level accounts, right? And you should be figuring out how quickly you rotate those accounts. Right? I put 90 days, but many teams actually do it even more frequently than 90 days. I've seen teams doing it every week or even every day, right? Because once you automate it, you don't need to do anything, right? All the automation does rotate the keys and does all the magic in the background. But 90 days is kind of a must, right? You should be rotating those things. So along with that, so let's go into this, how you secure the networking, right? So VPC is the virtual private cloud, right? That's a construct available in AWS. You should be using it, right? Earlier it was that something you need to set up. Now AWS does VPC by default, right? And then you can actually tweak it and have multiple virtual private clouds, right? And sometimes you use it to segregate within your account a dev, stage, production, right? So you can do that so that you can actually restrict any traffic from one to another, right? And VPC happens within your own account, right? And then you should also look at how you can, this allows you to control, right? If you have to connect or put integrations to other cloud providers or back to your enterprise, if your database is sitting or you need to build any connectivity, use things like Direct Connect and VPN gateways actually to bring that traffic. And you can actually have a choking point like a firewall or ACLs you can have to allow certain traffic and certain things from there. So definitely leveraging the VPC properly. Now, AWS, along with VPC, which is at the network level, they have a web application firewall, right? Which you can just, if you're running a application and you can enable a WAF in front of that, right? And WAF gives you multiple advantage. From standard, the OWASP top 10, which is the top 10 web application security vulnerabilities, they also help you to handle DDoS and other attacks in your at the application level, right? So definitely look into that. Some of the best practices, right, which we talked about, using the network ACLs and security groups, right, and segregating your QA, dev, production environments. Many teams use different accounts because you can have multiple accounts for production, non-production, different accounts. Some teams use dedicated VPCs for that, right? So we talked about, so use one of that mechanism. We talked about the segregating your management zone, setting up a bastion host, right? So you should be looking at all that, and transport encryption, right? So that's another big thing, especially for the HIPAA. That's a mandatory thing, right? You not only are required to do any HIPAA traffic outside on encrypted, even within your VPC, within your environment, you are required to enable encryption on that, right? So you should be leveraging that. The next one is the encryption, right? So as I talked about, right, so AWS gives you multiple ways to do encryption, which is good and bad, right? Because sometimes it's too complex. But especially if you're dealing with the PHI data here or HIPAA compliance, you should be looking at how you can manage the keys, right? Because as a security professional, I wouldn't like for any cloud provider to have both keys as well as the encrypted data. Then they have they pretty much have the data in their hand, right? So because they have the keys. So you should be looking at how you use the cloud HSM or other key management services where you manage the key and take it out, right? And use it and let use some of those services, right? And so we talked about security logging, right? So there were 3 types of logging which we talked about, right? One was at the one is something called CloudTrail, right? That is all the API activity, all the user activity. That's that to me is a must, right? So you need to be enabled. That means you should be. That gives you a visibility into what's happening in an account. VPC flow is equivalent to, if you are familiar with net flow logs, right? At the network level, it can give you what connections are coming in and out of your VPC. And that gives you additional visibility, especially if some of your host is compromised and it's connecting back to command and control servers, right? VPC flows gives you quick visibility as well as it's useful for investigations. S3 buckets, right, as I talked about, has been kind of much in news. Many compromises related to AWS has been where customers have not configured their S3 buckets correctly. There was one big one from Verizon last year, right, which has millions of customer accounts actually compromised because their S3 buckets was not enabled. So now I think AWS has done a good job in enabling a lot of logging and enabling some default proper configurations of S3 bucket, right? So, but you should take advantage of that as well as probably focus on how you're using and configuring S3 buckets, right? So putting your logs, right, and as well as when you set up your logs, right, you should be thinking about what should be the retention period, right? So 6 months is a standard one, right? We use within Cisco, and I will recommend, right? But based on your needs, based on how you want to do, you can tweak that, right? How much log we want to keep for how much duration for investigation or other legal purposes. I talked about Trusted Advisor. That's a service which comes within your account, right? So highly recommend to leverage that. So it does some standard checks. Currently, I think it does around 17 or 20 different checks on your account, right, on a weekly basis. So in this case, I just give you a screenshot of it does checks against S3 permission, MFA permissions, and other things, and it's giving you the standard red, orange, green, right? Which one of them it's figuring out in your account is not configured properly versus where what it sees is done, right? So leverage that because that gives visibility of your account. Now, to summarize, right? So this is just one simple example of hardening, right? And I just took an example of a typical CI/CD pipeline, right? So CI/CD pipeline is continuous integration, continuous deployment. Many teams who are migrating to cloud or AWS for medium to bigger enterprises still want to do the development in-house and deploy their services in the cloud, right? So what you see in this picture is at the bottom, right? So the development is happening in-house, right? And when the code is ready to be deployed, right, it's actually pushed to the cloud here, right? And you see different setups there, right? So any accesses to the bastion host, you have the hardening done, right? And you may want to be running a continuous scripts to validate the hardening, right? You see the relational database, which is encrypted, right, with the keys. You can actually have S3 bucket and storage all managed by encryption with the keys, right? So you go and do the deployment. So cloud definitely gives you an opportunity to leverage all those facilities that are available on AWS and other cloud providers, right? But it comes to you or the consumers here to do them in a correct fashion.
For more information, click on the link below or visit databrackets.com.